Hi, you're watching Dare to Dream, and I am your host, Denise Smith. If you have the deep determination to succeed, you will not fail. Continue to dare to dream with me today. We are talking about real estate, and we are talking about real estate stories that have taken place. I have been a real estate agent since 1990. I started in financing in 1979 when I was 14 years old. It was the very first job that I had, a summer program job that I started. It was really exciting because real estate is not something that I really wanted to do, but real estate was something that I was interested in. I want to talk about real estate stories today. The first real estate story that I'd like to share with you today is it was a buyer purchasing real estate. And what happened to that buyer was things that I would like to discuss because I don't want it to happen to you. They were a first-time buyer, and it was the very first transaction I had ever sold. It was in San Francisco, and they had actually purchased real estate for $500,000. That was in 1990. $500,000 for the very first property that they purchased, that was a lot of money back then. It's a lot of money now. But it was so exciting because what they did is they purchased a house that they had to fix up. They were so excited initially because it needed so much work that they said, I'm going to fix it up and I'm going to make it beautiful. Well, we had received, and anytime you purchase real estate, you should always obtain a termite inspection and a contractor's inspection. Well, they did obtain those inspections, but what happened to them was something that happened later. They were so excited to buy that property. Every time I would tell them that it needed too much work, they would always say, no, this is the property for me. They got so excited about the property that they kept saying, I want this property, and no matter what you tell me, it doesn't matter. I'm going to still buy it. So every time I would say to them, I think we need to find another property that didn't need as much work. And they would say, no, I love this property. So the first buyer that I worked with, you know, they loved it. You fall in love like a relationship. You fall in love with that person, and then you find out that that person might not be everything that you thought it was going to be. Well, guess what? That's what happened with that house. No matter what I told them not to buy, no matter what I said to them, they fell in love. And you know, sometimes love is blind. And when love is blind, you fall in love with the wrong thing. And that's what they did. They fell in love with the house, and after they fell in love with the house, there was nothing I could tell them about that house, even after we received all our inspections. Okay, move forward from there. They purchased the property. When they purchased the property, after 6 months of them living there, it needed a new sewer, it needed a new roof, it needed a new electrical system. By the time they finished in that house, the whole house had to be redone. Initially, it was really exciting, but after they realized that it needed so much work, there were 2 young men that were purchasing the property, and they were brothers. They were so excited. They called me up after 6 months, and they told me, you were right. We shouldn't have bought the property. But by that time, the love was lost. Here we are. They purchased the property. It needed too much work, and what it ended up being is a money pit. Well, needless to say, it's cheaper to keep her. So it was cheaper to keep the house. They had to keep the house for a long period of time because initially they were going to fix the house up, they were going to sell it and make all this money. They had all these grandeur ideas of things they were going to do to that house. Ultimately, it became a money pit to the point where it was so much work that they put so much money into the house. They decided that they were going to just have to keep the home because it started out project after project after project after project. It was a full-time job to keep up that property. They still own the property to this day. That was in 1990. One good thing that took place was that they did keep the property, and all the money that they put into the property, they finally realized equity in that property. The property finally went up, but 20 years later, 30 years later, it finally went up. We don't want you to buy a money pit. We want you to find a property and not fall in love with it, but to really look at that property and look at all its imperfections. Imperfections, you will find them in the termite report, the licensed contractor, and you don't want your Bobo the clown, or you don't want your friend next door or your relative to just come and look at the property. You want a licensed contractor with a licensed termite inspector, and you want to make sure that the people, a licensed roofer, you want people that are licensed to look at that property. And you want to make sure that when they look at the property and they get the reports, you want to go back to the seller and you want to see if the seller maybe possibly might make an allowance for the work that has to be done. That was a real story that I just told you. I just didn't tell you the names, but that's a real story. So if you could learn from the buyer's mistakes, and I mean serious mistakes, I want you to learn from them so that when you buy a house, you won't buy a money pit. You won't fall in love and not fall out of love after so many years. You actually purchase a property. I can say real estate is still the best investment going. That will secure your financial future. There's some good real estate and there's some bad real estate. So you want to work with a licensed real estate broker that's going to help you and really going to give you information. You see, real estate is commission only. If you don't sell a house, you do not get paid. So for that reason, I've sold hundreds and hundreds of houses. I've talked to my clients that I sold 20 years ago. I sold houses with. Long time ago. It's been a blessing. It's been a blessing to still know my clients after so many years. I have some families that I have sold 12 houses in their family. And you know why? Because they trust me. I'm not going to tell them to buy a property if I don't think they should. Just for the commission. You see, because it is commission only, you really got to be careful with who you work with. Always make sure that you pick a licensed real estate agent or licensed real estate broker. The question comes up all the time. What's the difference between a real estate agent and a real estate broker? I'll tell you. The difference between a real estate agent and a real estate broker is that a real estate agent has to work under or be employed by a real estate broker. I'll give you an example. If you receive your real estate license, you have to go to a major, or not a major, you can go to a small company. It doesn't matter how large or small or medium size, it doesn't matter. But a real estate agent has to be employed by a real estate broker. You cannot open your own company if you're a real estate agent. You have to work for a real estate broker for several years, 2 years, before you can go and get a real estate broker's license. Or if you have a 4-year degree, you can just become a real estate broker automatically. If you're interested in learning on how to become a real estate agent, I will be happy to help you. You can give me a call anytime. But I'm talking about real estate stories today. So the first real estate story, I'd like you to learn from that. Learn that just because you fall in love, make sure you look at imperfections. Make sure of that, because that'll help you from losing a lot of money later on. Be real careful in the real estate agent that you choose, real estate broker. Real estate broker can open up their own real estate company. I am a real estate broker and I own Royal Realtors and Loan Services. We call it Royal Realtors because when 2008 hit and the economy just went down. I don't know if anybody is familiar when the recession hit in 2008. But when it did, a lot of people went into foreclosure. A lot of people lost their homes. So in '08, I decided that I'm going to do loans, I'm going to do sales, but really sales was the #1 interest that I really concentrated on. I started in financing in 1979, so I learned about financing and I know loans really well. Matter of fact, you can give me a call and I could tell you over the phone what you're pre-qualified to buy. I'm really excited about that because not all real estate agents know how to do that. Some real estate agents will send you to a bank or send you to a loan broker or send you to someone else, and then they'll tell you, come back and tell me what you're qualified to buy. I'll be able to tell you immediately just by knowing you have to put your documents together. It's very important that you put your documents together. What documents do you need to put together? If you're interested in purchasing today and you think that you are ready, you should put together 2 years W-2s if you're salaried, 1 month of bank statements, actually 3 months of bank statements, 1 month of paycheck stubs. Again, you put together 1 month of paycheck stubs, 3 months of bank statements, and 2 years of W-2s or 2 years of tax returns. You see, they want to make sure that you consistently have been earning income for the last 2 years. And the W-2s and the tax returns will verify that. Once you put those documents together, you then either bring it to your real estate agent or you bring it to a bank to get pre-qualified. Once you have those documents together, you're able to actually go through and the bank will tell you you're qualified to buy this amount. They'll give you what's called a pre-qualification letter, and that pre-qualification letter is a blank check. You basically can turn that over to the real estate agent and say, please help me to find a property. That's how you get pre-qualified, and that is what you should do. You see, when you start looking at property and you decide that you really would like to purchase property, once you start looking at real estate in the newspaper or you see an open house, it's really important that you know what you're pre-qualified to buy. Otherwise, you're looking at properties only to find out what the values are in the areas. And that's good too. But if you're only on a fact-finding mission to find out what properties are available at in what location, that's good. Great, do that. But if you're really serious and you feel you're ready to be pre-qualified, put those documents together and then take them to the bank, and then the bank will show you what you're pre-qualified and give you a pre-qualification letter that will show you what you're pre-qualified for. It's very important to get pre-qualified. Okay, we're going to talk about stories, real estate stories. I'm going to talk about the very first house that I sold as a seller. Now, I told you about the very first house that I represented as a buyer. The buyer I represented, and they were purchasing real estate. They fell in love with the property, and they couldn't listen to what I was saying when I told them it needed too much work. Okay, let's learn from that mistake. Let that not be you. Okay, the next house, the very first house that I sold, I represented the seller. You see, as a real estate broker, you represent buyers and sellers. Some real estate agents only represent buyers and some only represent sellers. I represent buyers and sellers, and I also help with loans as well. All right. I represented the seller on this one transaction. What happened is it was the longest sale, the very first house I sold in 1990. When I represented the seller, I was so excited that they chose me to sell their house. I was so excited, I did whatever the seller wanted me to do, which not always is the brightest thing. You see, real estate brokers and real estate agents, based on their experience, will be able to help you. But this was the very first property that I had sold. They were a senior citizen couple, and they loved me. They were so sweet. They were so kind, and they really wanted the maximum price for their house. It was the longest sale that I ever had. You know why it was the longest sale? The house was on a busy street. The busiest street in San Francisco. And if anybody knows San Francisco's busy street, you know, San Francisco is one of the #1 areas that pedestrians get killed in. Top 5 cities that pedestrians get killed in. It's really sad, but the fact is, if you're on a busy street, it's one of the hardest sales that you will have. So learn from that, and if you're a buyer, try to stay away from a busy street. Sometimes, though, a busy street could be more affordable. And if it's more affordable, then you sometimes say, okay, I could live on a busy street. But if you buy a house on a busy street, you're gonna wait a long time to sell that house so you could build some equity. Because a busy street is the hardest sale, one of the hardest sales. It was hard. It was a difficult sale for me for being the very first seller that I represented. And as representing the seller, it was difficult because no one wanted to buy that house on the busy street. Also, what happened is I was listening to the seller, and the seller really wanted to price that house for way too high. And I was so excited that they chose me to represent them, you know, as a seller, that I said, okay, we'll price it for what you want to price it at. Priced it way too high. And you priced it 2 things going for you that was really not good. A busy street, way too over the market price, where I'll give you an example. The houses in the area was selling for $300,000, and they priced it for $700,000. As a new agent, an experienced agent, I'm more experienced now. Now I would tell the seller, you shouldn't do that. And I will explain to them why they shouldn't do that. Because the house will just sit. Because every other house in the neighborhood is $300,000. And yours is $700,000. You could do the math. You understand what the problem is there. Everybody's looking at the same houses. So everybody will drive by the busy street and they'll see that house and they'll say, oh, that house is way too expensive. Or they'll say, something is wrong with that house because it hasn't sold. Well, I will tell you, at the time that I worked with these clients, I, at the time, was a real estate agent, so I worked in a real estate company. As I told you before, a real estate agent has to work under a real estate broker. So I worked for a real estate company at the time. I won't say the name of the company, but it was a large company. And that company, in working with that company, they gave me experience, they gave me lessons, they gave me teaching, they trained me, but they trained me how to not get sued. But they really didn't train me on how to price properties and all of that. So I had to learn. I'm very experienced now. But there was a lot of pitfalls that I had to fall through. So what happened in that house? It took me 4 years to sell that house. But fortunately, the seniors, they loved me. Oh, it was so wonderful. I had a wonderful relationship with them. I know them to this day. 4 years later, by that time, I owned Royal Realtors. That's how long it took me to sell that house. I had worked for a company for several years, and then I opened up my own company in 1994. And by the time I opened up my own company, they were still working with me. I brought the listing from that company and then brought it to my company that I owned. And by that time, I finally knew what was wrong. The busy street, it just wasn't going to sell for the price that they wanted. So I then lowered the price and then it sold. That is what happened. Okay, that's story number 2. All right. Now, we have several other stories, and I'm really hoping that these stories will help you. Because sometimes I find that sometimes if you have real stories, maybe you could relate to them. Because I don't want you to be the buyer that buys the wrong house and regrets it later. I don't want you to be the seller that doesn't listen to price the property right, because it ends up doing you a disservice if you price the property too high. Ultimately, you end up selling it for a lot less than you would have sold it if you would have just priced it right. Now, that message is for future sellers that are thinking of possibly selling their house in the future. So remember, if you're selling a house, look at the comparables in the area. What are comparables? Comparables are houses that have sold in the area that are like that property, roughly the same square footage as that property, same bedrooms, baths, and has the same kind of similarities to the property, and close in proximity in the neighborhood. That's really important. Like, you cannot look in, for example, I can't compare houses in Oakland to San Francisco. It would not be comparable because it's a whole different area. So this is really important. Okay, I'm on my story number 3 now. This is my other story I have that I hope that will help you through this buying and selling real estate. Buying and selling in real estate has been a wonderful joy of mine. I love it because I've helped so many people reach their dreams. And hundreds of people have purchased real estate with me, and they have reached their dreams. They've bought property, they've sold property, they've bought quite a few properties. And it's always been a blessing for me to help them realize their dreams. In the houses, in the family that I told you I sold 12 houses in, they were all sisters. I love that family to this day. They had all girls in the family, and I sold every single one of them but one a house. And I was so excited because they're one of my favorite clients. Beautiful family. Beautiful, beautiful family. Now, story number 3. I had a house that I was selling. And you know, this time I represented the seller. And in this situation, I had sold them the property 18 years ago. 18 years ago. I'm going to talk about that. And when I sold them the property, they were the happiest family, a beautiful family. They had 5 kids. They were a beautiful, beautiful family. I love the family to this day. You know what could happen with stress? In 2008, when the recession hit and people started losing their jobs, this family went through a major crisis. From making $1 million a year to making nothing. So what happens when you make that kind of money? You spend it. And you spend and spend and spend like there's no tomorrow. But I know now why my grandmother told me to save for a rainy day. I know now. I didn't listen, but I know now why she told me to do that. And I know that it's important that we do it, because even when you make a lot of money, there's going to be a day that you will not, that something might happen. You might get sick. You might lose your job. And unfortunately, I hate the D word, but you might get a divorce. Somebody may pass away, and you might be in a whole different situation. So this is what happened to the family that I'm working with. They lost their job. And when they lost their job, finances will tear your family up. And when your finances tears your family up, what happens? You don't pay your bills, you fight, the kids see you fight, and then when you end up fighting, you end up losing your house. You lose your family, you lose your house, you lose your loved ones. So when they first got married, it was so exciting to see them with their little babies. It was so exciting. Okay. Let's fast forward. Now we're 18 years. Now the kids fight. The kids kick the dog fights the cat. Everybody's fighting. We don't like that. And so ultimately what happens is you lose your house. Excuse me. You lose your house. And when you lose your house, it breaks up the whole family. So the most I can tell you is don't buy a house that you cannot afford in the event somebody passes away or if somebody loses their job. Don't do it. Excuse me. So, remember, buy in your means and, excuse me, excuse me, and if you don't buy in your means, what ultimately will happen is you will lose your house. I hate the F word, foreclosure. It happens to so many people. 1 million foreclosures happened in '08. So many people lost their houses. They lost their families. They lost their jobs. They lost their houses. And to me, it really chokes me up because these people I love that lost houses. It's unfortunate. It really is. But now, what I would like to say is that the good thing is that they have put their family back together. They have sold that house. They have now, they're working towards a new day of purchasing a house that is in their means. You know, because when you don't live in your means and you keep up with the Joneses, what ultimately happens, you lose everything. So you don't want to do that. Live within your means. And when I say live within your means, I'm speaking real clear about if you could afford $1 million house, get the $500,000 house so that you could have more money in the bank. So you could take care of your kids, send them to college, and do wonderful things with your family. You see, because when you have financial issues and challenges, it puts stress on the family. So when I tell you to buy within your means, buy within your means. I told you 3 stories today, 3 really important stories that I really hope that helped you today. And I hope that when you purchase real estate, that you'll make sure that you purchase the right property, that you make sure that you don't buy outside of your means. Make sure that you find the real estate agent or real estate broker that's going to help you with your needs. You can call me anytime. My email's on there. You can ask me any questions at all, and I will answer your questions on the air. So just let me know if you have any questions at all. I will close with this. If you have the deep determination to succeed, you will not fail. So continue to dare to dream with me in real estate. God bless.